This story comes to us from WGME.com out of Augusta, Maine. Now, if you're a veteran, a real veteran, this story might piss you off a little or a lot. But a combat wounded U.S. Marine filed a federal lawsuit against two Maine police departments after an officer shot him in his house. Robert Farrington couldn't hear the officers knocking on his door to serve him an arrest warrant in 2019 because he had hearing loss from serving in Afghanistan, according to a federal lawsuit that's been filed. Now, he thought the police were burglars when he finally came to his door with a handgun after his fiancée woke him up. His suit challenged the validity of the warrant they used and alleges that police violated his Fourth Amendment civil rights when they came to arrest him on a domestic violence charge, which was later dismissed. And when they dismissed those charges, when the charges were later dismissed, it makes you kind of wonder. Makes you kind of go, Because you know that prosecutor wants that chalk mark in the W. He doesn't want to take that L. So, or is it L? Whatever. But he doesn't want to get that loss. So, makes you wonder the validity of those charges to begin with. Police went to Farrington's house after midnight on November 23rd, 2019. That's around Thanksgiving. To arrest him. It ended with Farrington, who was 27 years old at the time, being shot from behind by Augusta officer Sebastian Guptill. The bullet traveled through his pelvis and lodged in a bone on his right side. Now, the experience was as traumatic as anything he'd seen during his 2 tours of duty in Afghanistan. This is a U.S. Marine who served in the Middle East for our rights. And I know there are people going to say, they're not serving for our freedoms. They're not serving for our rights. And I partially get that argument that some people offer because I know when I was in the Army, I'm proud of my Army service. I'm proud that I was able to serve because, people now have freedom of, you're supposed to have freedom of speech, freedom of the press, the right to peaceably assemble, and all the other elements that go with the First Amendment. And I feel like I contributed to that with my Army service. But there is that argument that when you are a U.S. military member, you're just a number. You're just a barcode to the U.S. government. And I agree with that argument to a certain extent because, when I was in the Army, I really didn't have a whole lot of rights. I didn't. A sergeant can say or do it's almost like police force. A sergeant in the Army or a lieutenant or an officer or whoever, your superior, could say or do anything to you and they were believed and you were not, kind of a thing. I digress. I don't know why I went off on a side tangent there. But it's, one of the reasons is I do get arguments from people about serving in the military. But let's get back to this guy in Maine. He survived, but he's permanently disabled despite surgery and years of physical therapy, according to a lawsuit filed in the U.S. District Court of Maine. Farrington was on active duty in the U.S. Marine Corps from 2010 to 2016, serving in Afghanistan and the Pacific Rim. Among others, the lawsuit names the Somerset Regional Communications Center, who dispatch, I believe, Augusta and Fairfield police departments, their chiefs, and Officer Guptill. Augusta and Fairfield police, as well as Somerset County officials, did not respond to requests for comment. The Attorney General's office last August found that Guptill acted in self-defense when he shot Farrington. From behind, by the way. What was Farrington had his gun like this? The barrel. I'm going to shoot you. Oh, I guess I'm not. What? How is it self-defense when you shoot him from behind? Farrington was shot during a combat deployment in 2013 in Afghanistan, recovered and returned for another tour of duty. There's a soldier for it. That's a warrior. He had tinnitus and PTSD from the 2013 deployment. The lawsuit says that tinnitus is what affected his hearing. His house had a special doorbell that rang at a frequency that allowed him to hear. But he was asleep with his fiancée when police arrived after midnight to arrest him for domestic violence against another woman, according to the lawsuit. Guptill knocked on a side glass door for several minutes. Farrington did not wake up. No officers rang the doorbell designed for his tinnitus. Now, when you come up, aren't you going to ring the doorbell if you're a cop? You're knocking, you're knocking, you're knocking. Hey, genius, ring the doorbell. Oh, yeah. Police got a temporary felony warrant, which is not legal under the Fourth Amendment, the lawsuit says. The domestic violence case was a misdemeanor, which was later dismissed, Farrington's attorney, Christine Hanley, told the Bangor Daily News. So it was a misdemeanor domestic violence, which was later dismissed. Again, another charge that gets dismissed. And they took out a temporary felony warrant for this misdemeanor. You see what I'm saying? Cops doing a little pencil whipping. Then it goes down and talks about what exactly happened. I don't want to give you the little bitty details because we've already went over that. But it says Guptill said he identified himself as a police officer and told Farrington drop the gun, but Farrington raised it, the Maine Attorney General's office found. That's when Guptill started shooting while ducking for cover because he thought his life was in danger. But again, they say Farrington was shot from behind. I'm trying to figure this out. The lawsuit says Farrington did not fire the gun. Farrington experienced a hail of gunfire directed at him in his home, which caused emotional distress so severe that no reasonable person should be expected to endure it. And we're talking about a guy who had guns going off around him in the Middle East. There's a documentary, I think it's called Fallujah. It might be called something else. And it was this camera guy, a documentarian. You should watch it. Look it up. He goes into combat with these army soldiers. I mean, he's there. Bullets are zinging, firefight going on. One sergeant gets fatally shot, and they're like, you know what? We'll get Sarge later. We got to keep going. We got to focus. And I mean, I'm just watching this with anxiety, like, whoa. My point is, this guy has PTSD to the fullest extent. Farrington had well-managed post-traumatic stress disorder from his time as an active duty U.S. Marine, and he now experiences daily symptoms because of the shooting. The lawsuit is asking for a jury trial and an unspecified amount of money. They want this cop charged, Guptill. But it goes back to, there's so many questions about this. Misdemeanor domestic violence, charges were dismissed. They get a felony arrest warrant for the misdemeanor. So it just, there's so many questions about that. And he was shot from behind, but the cop said he raised his gun and a firefight ensued. But he was shot from behind, and they say he never fired his gun. So was the firefight this cop just pulling off rounds? Guys, again, I'm going to say it. I'm going to end it with this question. Do you really believe you're free in the United States of America?